We continue Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Arthur Hugh Clough, by starting Coriolanus. The patrician house of the Marquis in Rome produced many men of distinction, and among the rest, Ancus Marcius, grandson to Numa, by his daughter, and king after Tullus, Hostilius, of the same family, were also Publius and Quintus Marcius, which two conveyed into the city the best and most abundant supply of water they have at Rome, as likewise Censorinus, who, having been twice chosen censor by the people, afterwards himself induced them to make a law that nobody should bear that office twice, which, sort of makes sense, but I'd rather have the same person in 5 times than, somebody who's just not as well. I know people are saying, well, cults of personality is why that happens, but not always. But Caius Marcius, of whom I now write, being left an orphan and brought up under the widowhood of his mother, has shown us by experience that although the early loss of father may be attended with other disadvantages, yet it can hinder none from being either virtuous or eminent in the world, and that it is no obstacle to true goodness and excellence, however bad men may be pleased to lay the blame of their corruptions upon that misfortune and the neglect of them in their minority. Nor is he less an evidence to the truth of their opinion who conceive that a generous and worthy nature, without proper discipline, like a rich soil without culture, is apt with its better fruits to produce also much that is bad and faulty, while the force and vigor of his soul, and a persevering constancy in all he undertook, led him successfully into many noble achievements, yet on the other side also by indulging the vehemence of his passion, and through an obstinate reluctance to yield or accommodate his humors and sentiments to those of the people about him, he rendered himself incapable of acting and associating with others, those who saw with admiration how proof his nature was against all the softness of pleasure, the hardships of service, and the allurements of gain, while allowing to that universal firmness of his respective names of temperance, fortitude, and justice, yet in the life of the citizen and the statesman could not choose but be disgusted at the severity and ruggedness of his deportment, and with his overbearing, haughty, and imperious temper, education and study, and the favors of the muses, confer no greater benefit on those that seek to them than these humanizing and civilizing lessons, which teach our natural qualities to submit to the limitations prescribed by reason, and to avoid the wildness of extremes. Those were times at Rome which that kind of worth was most esteemed, which displayed itself in military achievements, one evidence of which we find in the Latin word for virtue, which is properly equivalent to manly courage, as if valor and all virtue had been the same thing. They use the common term, the name of the particular excellence, but Marcius, having a more passionate inclination than any of that age for feats of war, began at once, from his very childhood, to handle arms, and, feeling that adventitious implements and artificial arms would effect little, and be of small use to such as have not their native and natural weapons well fixed and prepared for service, he so exercised and inured his body to all sorts of activity and encounter, that besides the lightness of a racer, he had a weight of close seizures and wrestlings with an enemy, from which it was hard for any to disengage himself, so that his competitors at home, in displays of bravery, loath to own themselves inferior in that respect, were wont to ascribe their deficiencies to his strength of body, which, they say, no resistance and no fatigue could exhaust. And people are talking about this ableist thing, and it's important to notice that disabled people don't want you calling them disabled all the time. I mean, the vast majority of them do. They don't want that. you know. But, you know, offering excuses for people's failures is sometimes a good thing, right? But yeah, if you notice they have some sort of bodily issues, like, well, I don't know the extent of that, and maybe that's why he's not performing physically. The first time he went out to the wars, being yet a stripling, was when Tarquinius Suburbus, who had been king of Rome, and was afterwards expelled after many unsuccessful attempts, now entered upon his last effort, and proceeded to hazard all, as it were, upon a single throw. A great number of the Latins and other people of Italy joined their forces, and were marching with him toward the city, to procure his restoration, not, however, so much out of the desire to serve and oblige Tarquin as to gratify their own fear and envy at the increase of the Roman greatness, which they were anxious to check and reduce. The armies met and engaged in a decisive battle, in the vicissitudes of which Marcius, while fighting bravely in the dictator's presence, saw a Roman soldier struck down at a little distance, and immediately stepped in and stood before him and slew his assailant. The general, after having gained the victory, crowned him for this act, one of the first with a garland of oaken branches, it being the Roman citizen thus to adorn those who had saved the life of a citizen, whether that the law intended some special honor to the oak, in memory of the Arcadians, a people the oracle had made famous by the name of acorn eaters, or whether the reason of it was because they might easily, and in all places where they fought, have plenty of oak for that purpose, or finally, whether the oaken wreath, being sacred to Jupiter, the guardian of the city, might therefore be thought a proper ornament for one who preserved a citizen. And the oak, in truth, is the tree which bears the most and prettiest fruit of all that grow wild, and is the strongest of all that are under cultivation. Its acorns were the principal diet of the first mortals, and the honey found in it gave them drink. I may say too that it furnished fowl and other creatures as dainties in producing mistletoe for birdlime to ensnare them. In this battle, meantime, it is stated that Castor and Pollux appeared, and immediately after the battle were seen at Rome, just by the fountain where their temple now stands, with their horses foaming with sweat, and told the news of the victory to the people in the Forum. The 15th of July, being the day of this conquest, became consequently a solemn holiday, sacred to the twin brothers. And let us remember that acorns, like certain other foods, require certain processing to eat. It may be observed in general that when young men arrive early at fame and repute, if they are of a nature but slightly touched with emulation, this early attainment is apt to extinguish their thirst and satiate their appetite, whereas the first distinctions of more and solid weighty characters do but stimulate and quicken them, and take them away like a wind in the pursuit of honor. They look upon these marks and testimonies to their virtue, not as a recompense received for what they have already done, but as a pledge given by themselves of what they will perform hereafter. Always have goals of stuff to do in the future, right? Ashamed now to forsake or underlive the credit they have won, or rather not to exceed and obscure all that has gone before by the luster of their following actions. Marcius, having the spirit of the noble make, was ambitious always to surpass himself, and did nothing how extraordinarily soever, but he thought he was bound to outdo it at the next occasion, and ever desiring to give continual fresh instances of his prowess, he added one exploit to another, and heaped up trophies upon trophies, so as to make it matter of contest also among the commanders, the latter still vying with the earlier, which should pay him the greatest honor, and speak highest in his commendation. Of all the numerous wars and conflicts in those days, there was not one from which he returned without laurels and rewards, and, whereas others made glory the end of their daring, the end of his glory was his mother's gladness, the delight she took to hear him praised and to see him crowned, and her weeping for joy